Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to make sense of the complex world around us. And today, we're tackling something really fundamental to medicine, but maybe a bit behind the scenes. Policy changes and regulatory reforms in drug development.
Yeah, it sounds dry, maybe, but it has this huge impact. It really shapes how new treatments are developed, how they get approved.
Just like the rule book is constantly being updated, right?
Yeah.
We've looked at a whole range of sources, the really foundational stuff like the Code of Federal
And
Regulations,
CFR, yep.
all the way to the very practical, hands-on research you see in organic process research and development, OPR&D.
Right, that real-world chemistry perspective.
So our mission today is really to try and get a clearer view of, well, what shifts might be coming, what are the current debates, the potential changes, and how is the industry actually preparing?
Exactly, because these regulations, they don't exist in a vacuum. They have to adapt. Science changes, technology changes.
We learn things.
We learn things, precisely. So understanding where things might be headed isn't just, an academic exercise. It's about the future of healthcare innovation itself. And using those real examples, especially from places like OPR&D, helps make it tangible.
Okay, so before we jump into the future, maybe we should quickly sketch out the present. What's the basic regulatory landscape look like right now?
Well, the core idea, whether it's the FDA in the US or international efforts like ICH, is always about safety. Efficacy, does it work? And critically, manufacturing quality.
Right.
And when you talk manufacturing, Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations is, well, people often call it the Bible for that area.
The Bible, okay. And within that, I hear a lot about GMP.
GMP.
Yeah?
Good manufacturing practices, absolutely fundamental. It's all about setting up processes to prevent errors, and ensure consistency and quality.
So kind of like the master recipe and instructions for making a drug safely every single time.
That's a great way to put it. And a huge part of GMP, maybe the biggest part, is documentation. You have to write everything down. Pretty much. The Certified Pharmaceutical GMP Professional Handbook really drives this home. It's how you prove you followed the rules, how regulators can trace everything if needed. But beyond just avoiding mistakes, there's this push towards something called quality by design, QBD.
QBD, yeah, that term keeps popping up.
Yeah.
What's the shift there? What does it really mean?
So instead of the old way, which was maybe make a batch, test it at the end, hope it passes.
Fingers crossed.
Maybe a bit.
No.
QBD flips that. It's about building the quality into the process from the very beginning. You identify what really matters for the drug, the critical quality attributes,
Okay.
and then you design your manufacturing process, including defining a design space, which is like the acceptable operating window, to ensure you hit those attributes consistently. Comprehensive quality by design explains this really well. And agencies like the FDA, they're really encouraging this proactive approach.
Okay. So it's like understanding exactly how oven temperature, mixing time, ingredient ratios all guarantee a perfect cake rather than just tasting it afterwards.
Exactly. It's process understanding.
What about unwanted stuff getting into the drug? Impurities.
Oh, definitely. Managing impurities is another huge piece. Guidelines like ICH, Q3BR, and resources like safety evaluation of pharmaceuticals and medical devices, they provide the framework. You need to figure out where impurities might come from, understand the risks, and set strict limits.
Limits based on safety, presumably.
Absolutely. And for certain types, like DNA reactive impurities, things that could potentially cause genetic damage, the FDA has even more specific guidance on how low those levels need to be and how you prove it.
Got it. So that's the baseline. Now let's look ahead. What are some of these potential policy changes or reforms that people are talking about? Where might the rules shift?
Well, there are a few areas getting attention. One is around dietary supplements, specifically those with new dietary ingredients.
Okay.
Right now, under 21 CFR 190.6, companies need to notify the FDA 75 days before marketing, providing safety data. There's ongoing discussion about whether those requirements need to be strengthened.
To strengthen how? Like demanding more data up front.
Potentially, yes. To give greater assurance about safety before something hits the shelves. Another area is how data from clinical trials conducted outside the U.S. is used.
Foreign clinical data.
The FDA does accept it for IND applications and approvals. That's in 21 CFR 312. But the sponsors have to show the studies followed good clinical practice, GCP. The standards might evolve on exactly what evidence is needed to prove that.
Right. You want to ensure the science and ethics hold up wherever the trial was done. Makes sense. What else?
The Orphan Drug designation that's under 21 CFR 316, this gives incentives, like market exclusivity, for developing drugs for rare diseases.
A really important area.
Hugely important. But there are always discussions around, well, what qualifies as rare? How long should exclusivity last? Could the designation be revoked under certain conditions? Those definitions and terms could see adjustments.
I can imagine that's a tricky balance encouraging development without creating, access issues later on.
It's a constant balancing act. And finally, something maybe less headline-grabbing but still vital. The rules around electronic records and signatures. 21 CFR Part 11. As tech evolves, how companies manage data digitally, ensure its integrity, prove compliance, those rules likely need updating too.
Okay, so if some or all of these changes happen, what's the real-world effect? How does this actually impact the process of getting a new drug from the lab to the patient?
Well, the most immediate thing people think about is time and money. Drug development is already incredibly long and expensive. The Clinical Trials Handbook lays that out pretty starkly. If new regulations demand, say, larger trials, more complex analyses, or more extensive pre-market data like we discussed for supplements, that inevitably adds to the timelines and the costs.
So potentially making it even harder, or at least more resource-intensive, to innovate.
That's definitely a concern, yes. Another impact could be on sourcing starting materials for manufacturing. The CMC transcripts from Season 11 really emphasize risk assessment across the whole supply chain. If regulations tighten, companies might need to do much more rigorous auditing of their suppliers or demand stricter quality specs for raw material.
Okay, adding layers of complexity to manufacturing.
It could, yes. The aim would be enhanced safety and reliability, but it adds work. And then there's clinical trial design itself. We might see changes affecting, for instance, when you can recalculate sample sizes mid-trial.
Sample size re-estimation, yeah.
As mentioned in the Clinical Trials Handbook. Or the further adoption and regulation of adaptive trial designs. These are trials that can be modified based on incoming data.
Adaptive designs. They sound more efficient, potentially.
They can be, absolutely. Books like Clinical Trial Design, Bayesian, and Frequentist Adaptive Methods explore this. But they also require careful planning and, regulatory buy-in. They're more complex to manage.
Right, so more sophisticated, but maybe more regulatory scrutiny, too.
Precisely. And you might also see regulators putting more emphasis on certain drug properties earlier on. Think about ADME properties, absorption, distribution, metabolism, excretion.
Stuff covered back in Seasons 2 and 3.
Exactly. How a drug behaves in the body. We might see stricter requirements for characterizing those properties during lead optimization or preclinical work. And of course, the FDA and similar agencies set the bar for all safety testing and oversee the phases of clinical trials, as we know from Seasons 3 and 4. Any tweak to their guidance directly changes how studies are conducted.
It really sounds like companies need to be incredibly agile, constantly scanning the horizon for these shifts. So how are they responding strategically? Are there good examples, maybe pulling from that OPR&D literature you mentioned?
Oh, absolutely. Companies are definitely not sitting still. One major trend is the increased use of process analytical technology, PAT. Yeah, this involves using sensors and real-time monitoring during the manufacturing process itself. A 2021 OPR&D paper by Garcia and colleagues showed a great case study. It helps ensure consistency, control quality better, and frankly, makes it easier to demonstrate compliance with evolving regulations.
So using tech to get a much tighter grip on the actual making of the drug.
Exactly. Another big area, driven partly by efficiency and cost, but also environmental concerns, is continuous flow synthesis.
Low chemistry.
There was a really neat OPR&D paper in 2019 from Cappy's group. They did a large-scale flow synthesis for a key part of the antidepressant paroxetine using a solvent-free, heterogeneous catalyst.
Solvent-free?
Yeah, which is great environmentally. And using catalysts effectively in flow systems like this can overcome some traditional scale-up challenges. It points towards more efficient, possibly greener manufacturing, which definitely aligns with where regulations might push things.
That's fascinating. Optimizing the chemistry itself is a response.
And OPR&D is just packed with examples of that kind of optimization. Improving yields, reducing impurities. You see papers detailing the synthesis of specific building blocks, like one from 2021 on a dioxyspiro compound, or another from 2020 on making an azetidine, or optimizing specific reactions like an amidation in 2021.
So really getting into the nitty-gritty chemical details.
Absolutely, because nailing those reaction conditions, solvent, temperature, amounts of stuff you add, is critical for getting a pure product reliably, especially when you scale up. That's often where you hit roadblocks like solubility issues, and that's where this detailed process chemistry becomes vital for meeting regulatory specs.
It's deep-level problem solving.
It really is. And related to that, we're seeing new synthetic methods in OPR&D that could help navigate potential regulatory hurdles around, say, problematic byproducts or environmental impact. Think about using water as a solvent for major reactions like Heck and Suzuki couplings. There was work on that reported in OPR&D in 2022.
Using water instead of traditional organic solvents, that's a big shift.
A huge shift, potentially offering major safety and sustainability advantages. And that's something regulators are increasingly interested in. Then there's the physical form of the drug crystallization and polymorph control.
The actual solid structure.
Yes. How the drug crystallizes affects its properties. A 2017 OPR&D paper by Kumar et al. Gets into the strategies. And even seemingly small things, like how you stir the mixture during crystallization scale-up, can impact which polymorph you get, as polymorphism in the pharmaceutical industry highlights. Regulators care a lot about consistent physical form.
So many factors to control.
It's incredibly complex. And one last thing to mention is the rise of AI and machine learning. The Era of Artificial Intelligence book talks about its growing role. AI could potentially help predict clinical trial outcomes, identify safety signals earlier, or optimize manufacturing processes to better align with shifting regulatory expectations. It's a tool that could help manage this evolving landscape.
Wow. It really does feel like we're at this intersection point, scientific advancement and regulatory evolution driving significant change.
I think that's exactly right. Drug development is inherently dynamic, and understanding these potential policy and regulatory shifts is just, well, it's essential for everyone involved, from researchers to manufacturers to regulators themselves. It's about ensuring we can keep bringing forward safe, effective, and innovative medicines.
So wrapping up this deep dive, the big question maybe left hanging is,
Yeah.
how will all these potential changes, this evolving landscape, ultimately play out for patients? In terms of access, affordability, it feels like this constant tension, doesn't it? Balancing rigorous oversight with encouraging innovation and ensuring that the treatments developed actually reach the people who need them.
That's the core challenge, always.
It's definitely something to keep watching as these policies continue to take shape. Thanks so much for breaking this down for us today.
My pleasure. It's a fascinating area.
And thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back soon with another exploration beneath the surface.